Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 484 of Ink in Your Veins. I'm Rachael Herron, and I am so excited that you are here with me today as I'm talking to Helena Echlin, who wrote a book that I loved, and I am so excited that you can read it too. We're going to be talking about how to write suspense that works, which as you know, if you've been listening to this show for a long time, I think is hard to do. Also, we talk about the power of a fuzzy outline and why you should start your book as late as possible. So that is coming up next. This will be a very short intro. I've been fighting a headache for a few days now, and I'm gonna twitch that curtain close. That helped. I'm feeling the need to go lie down and rest some more and wait for the meds to kick in. So I'm going to do that. But there's no big updates around here. Although did I mention? I can't remember. The Seven Miracles of Beatrix Holland, which comes out in August, from Grand Central Hachette, has a new cover. I don't think I mentioned this. The cover was kind of a black, spooky looking skull and crossbones, black and hot pink cover, and it was awesome, and I loved it. And then apparently the sales team at the publisher, read the book and got excited about it, which is awesome because sometimes the sales people don't have time to read all the books. But apparently they got excited about the book and also thought that the cover didn't quite work. And as soon as they said it, I agreed. Actually, I kind of already knew. The cover looked really dark and spooky. And this is not a very dark and spooky book. Um, it's a cozy read about difficult issues, if that makes sense. And difficult issues meaning family, of course. But it's cozy and sweet and warm and a little scary, but really with the Rachel Herron warmth that I can't not write with. And so they redesigned it. And if you follow me on social media, I will be posting it at some point. I haven't gotten around to it yet. But it's the cutest, now really pink cover. And it has a looking glass on the front because there's a mirror in the book and a book and flowers. And I just think it's so delightful. And that's exciting news. I love a cover reveal, especially when they rethink a cover because they're thinking about your book and how to sell it better. Couldn't love that more. So that's very exciting. That's the most exciting writing news going on, except that I just had another brainstorm for the ephemera book because I've started writing it and I started writing it out of order, which I've never done before. But um, I am trying something which is following what I am most desperate to write next, even though that means at the start of a book, I barely know anything. I've been thinking about this book and outlining it for a while, but really only playing because I haven't had time to devote to it. So when I go in and write, rather than working from A to Z, I'm going to be working from whatever I'm dying to write next, and then going to whatever I'm dying to write after that. And I will keep you updated on how it is going. I don't have a time frame for this. I think I mentioned in my plans for the year episode, I'm going to be writing this slowly as a treat to myself while I am focusing on some other business stuff here in the next few months, like um, optimizing book series and selling backlist and working on ads and also getting the fix, my next memoir ready to go, starting that in production for the next Kickstarter and for doing the audio of that. It's currently sent off to my copy editor. So Ephemera is just a fun project and it's so fun. And my mind just blew with a new revelation just a few minutes ago. So I'm still kind of reeling over that. So I guess there's lovely writing news, just nothing too exciting. Kittens are great. Dog is great. Summer is great. Lovely swimming happening around here. Now let's get into the interview because I could just talk about swimming forever. And that's not why you're here. You're here because you are a writer and because you think about your writing and because you know it is one of the most important things in life to you and you want to do it. And perhaps you're not doing as much as you want, or maybe you are and you just love hearing other writers talk about their process. All are welcome here. Don't forget to get on my email newsletter list for writers because I send out good stuff there, especially if you've never been on it. There's a whole auto sequence that comes through. I think it's 9 or 11 emails of really important stuff, and I give some cool stuff away. That's over at rachelherron.com/write. rachelherron.com/write. You can sign up for that right now, wherever you are, unless you're driving. Don't do that. But if you aren't driving, why don't you turn to your phone or your computer and just type that in and subscribe to my email list. I'd love to have you. Here is Helena's bio. Helena Echlin has written for numerous publications on both sides of the Atlantic, including The Guardian and The Times. She taught at Stanford University for 8 years and has recently returned to the UK, where she now teaches fiction writing for Oxford University's Department of Continuing Education. She lives in Oxfordshire with her husband and 2 children. And oh, you're going to love this interview. Here we go. Well, I am so pleased to welcome you to the show. Will you please share your name and pronouns with us?
Helena Echlin, and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. I loved your book. I could
Oh,
not put it down. Listeners have heard me say this before, but I get a lot of books, pre-pub arcs from, and I try all of them. I try little samples of them, but the ones that grab me and do not let me go, grabbed me, did not let me go. It was riveting. So thank you so much for writing it. Can you tell us a little bit about how you write, your writing process?
well, thank you, Rachel, for those lovely words,
You're
which
welcome.
are so great to hear. Um, I don't like to sit at my desk very much because when I'm sitting at my desk, I feel like I'm working. So I like to trick myself into feeling like I'm not working, but I'm just having a lovely time. So I like to sit on a sofa or maybe on a bed. I have a bed in my office, which is also the spare room, and I make a nest. So I have like a blanket. I have some books that some writers that I find inspiring. I have a cup of tea, and I have some dark chocolate.
Mm.
And my cozy little nest is where I like to write. But I also don't, I think a lot of writing is thinking. And so I do a lot of my thinking writing just walking around. I go for walks or runs, or, if I'm on a journey, I'll be writing in my head.
How are you capturing the thoughts as you are out there in the world walking around thinking about things? This is something I'm always struggling to do well.
I'd like to say I write them down in like an old leather-bound notebook, but
That
I
you
just put
keep
them on
in
my,
your pockets of your
yeah.
beautiful coat with the, yeah.
I just put them on my phone.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so you've got the cozy bed. I feel like I've only recently discovered this in the last few years. I got a recliner and I just love being in that recliner. I can't reach anything else when I'm in it. I'm so cozy and feet are up and it just feels not like work. We're
Yeah,
sitting here,
exactly.
this is work. Okay, what is the most exciting thing that you've ever realized about your writing process?
Um, well, as you know, the most exciting thing about the writing process is the flow state where everything else
Yeah.
drops away. But in terms of discovery, I think it's just something very simple, which is realizing how big a difference it makes if you start the story as late as possible in the
Mhm.
story. So even if you write your draft first, I would look at it and say, how late can I start? Can I put the middle at the beginning? It's just a trick, but it makes such a big difference.
Do you ever find that I always notice when I'm in the nitty-gritty revision, so after big revision and more in the closer to the line edit phase, I can do that with scenes too. I can go in and say, how late can I get into this scene? Oh my gosh,
So
I could lose
true.
these 5
Yeah.
paragraphs here, and then you can always get out earlier too, instead of walking to the door and opening it to leave. Ask the
And
question and stop.
if you start late in the scene, then you often don't even need to explain where they are or what they're doing. It becomes obvious. That's a really good
Get,
trick.
get in late, get out early. I love it. Are you more of a plotter or a pantser? And I'm desperate to know because particularly, I would love to know how you did this book. Did you know there were so
I
many
don't
surprises in it?
understand pantsers at all.
So you knew what
Who
was going
can
to
do
happen all
that?
the way
Who can do
through.
that? I don't know. Let me see. I like to do a fuzzy outline, so I'll definitely have a shape, but and it will have, the traditional story
Yeah.
beats in it, inciting incident, rock bottom, and that kind of thing. But it will be fuzzy. So I just won't know things until I get there. And that
Mhm.
was kind of a discovery with this book. I didn't know what the explanation, it's a book about a child who starts to behave very strangely and no one knows, and the mother doesn't know why. I didn't know what the reason was going to be. I had different ideas, but I didn't know. And when I found out the reason, which I realized on like a long coach ride, it was a surprise. I was like, oh yeah, that's the reason. But because it was a surprise to me, I think it
Yeah.
comes across as more as a surprise to the reader.
Yeah. Something that you did personally, just as a reader of it, I think I thought of a million ways as I was reading the book that a writer, not you in particular, but a writer wouldn't stick the landing. And I think I probably wouldn't stick the landing of that kind of book. I don't think I would get it right. And then you stuck the landing and it was just so perfect. I loved,
Oh, thanks
I
so
loved
much.
the reasons behind everything. And it was a satisfying conclusion. And I can only imagine that being on the coach and having that wash over you, that must have been, what did that feel like?
It orgasmic.
Yeah, totally, totally. And you'll never forget where you were when that happened, when that came
No,
to
and
you.
I
Yeah.
know I still go out of my way to ride that particular, it's the Oxford to London coach. I still go out of my way to include that on my journeys, even though it's a much slower way to get anywhere.
You never know. It's the magic coach. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. What part of writing do you really struggle with?
The demon on my shoulder, and you know what I'm talking about. Everyone's
Hmm.
got one. And I feel like by now it should have quietened down, but it's just the same. It just says different things. So before I got a book deal, it was saying, good enough. And then after the book deal, I assumed the demon would shut up for a bit, but it didn't. It just started saying different things, new things like this new book you're writing is going to be is not going to be as good as your previous book, for example. So it's that demon and learning to let it just talk in the background and not pay attention. That's the
That
hardest thing.
that's the most important thing for it, though. I was just talking to somebody about this recently, is that the more we argue, the smarter it gets. And if we rebut their argument 43, it just comes up with argument 44.
Right.
Ignoring it is the only thing that I've ever found that works with it. Is it, I can't, and forgive me for not knowing this, but is this your debut novel?
It's my debut psychological thriller. I have written
Okay.
other books.
Ah, I did that with Thriller as well. I came out as a debut
Yeah.
with many in Thriller with many books under my belt. Isn't that an interesting feeling when it says on the jacket, it's a debut, and I'm like, ah, it's not quite.
In some ways it feels like a debut because it's a whole new genre and
Yeah.
uh but yeah, sure. It's not truly a debut.
But we love it and readers love it, and that's what matters. That's awesome. What are you really good at writing wise? Please brag a little.
Um this is a really difficult question
That's
and
why I
I
include it.
struggled so hard with this question we had this, we were going to have this interview last week, and I was like, I'm not just not going to be able to answer it. And then I thought about it for a week. I was like, I'll come up with something. So I did come up with something, but I wanted to share how hard it was for me to think of anything. Maybe
Thank you
that's
for
a
thinking
demon
of it.
on the
And it would have
shoulder.
been okay for you to pass, but I'm very curious about what you came up with.
Suspense.
Yes, I agree.
Suspense is one of my favorite things. And I'll read a book that's not very well written if it's suspenseful, because I love a book that you can't put down. And I feel like modern life is very demanding and tiring, and suspense takes you away from all of that. Well,
How do
suspense
you,
takes me away from all of that.
what kind of tricks do you have to not let the air out of the tires of suspense?
Mm. I think an important one is time frame. You can't write a really suspenseful novel if the action takes place over the course of several years.
Yeah.
It needs to take place over the course of several months,
Hmm.
max, or maybe even a week. And you
Hmm.
can include periods from earlier in your protagonist's life, obviously, but they need to be backstory or flashbacks. And the reason for the compressed time frame is that suspense is about somebody pursuing a very urgent goal. And if that they're pursuing that goal over the course of several years, it's not an urgent goal. So a family saga, for example, can't be super suspenseful by definition. It can be like a very wonderful book, but it's going to be almost impossible to make that book unputdownable.
Hmm.
Um, I think surprise yourself is good. We talked about that a minute ago. For me anyway, like because a lot of suspense is about, the twists and turns and hiding what's going to happen. And especially readers of psychological thrillers, my genre, are now very, very, very good at spotting twists and turns. So they really
Hmm.
need to be well hidden. So I think not knowing what the turn is going to be makes it invisible. So yeah, surprise yourself, compress time frame, and then people think of suspense as lots of things happening very fast, but of course you need to slow down when the heroine is in jeopardy. Then you need to slow way down and notice every single little detail because the pleasure of suspense isn't necessarily the discovery, it's the anticipation. So when
Yeah.
you get right before something big is going to happen, then you need to slow way down.
Is that something that you naturally do in your first drafting, or is it something that you insert later?
A mixture. I think to some
Yeah.
extent it makes emotional sense because when you are in an extreme situation, everything does slow down anyway. A mixture, I would say.
Yeah. To to be very honest, like the thrillers that I wrote, I loved doing, and my agent does want another one. But I just found them so hard to do because of the suspense. I'm more of a women's fiction, you know, elongated writer, and to get that suspenseful tension right, I found very difficult. And I love that this is your superpower. And no wonder you moved into writing in the genre.
It's funny when you said this is your superpower, a horrible feeling went over me because of this feeling of it being so hard to say something good about yourself. Um, yeah, I mean, during the pandemic, which was an incredibly hard time for me as for everyone, basically, I really fell in love with suspense.
Mm.
I just love the genre because of its escapist quality.
Mhm.
So then I was just like, I read so many suspense books during the pandemic, at the end of very long, hard days, and I just really wanted to write one.
And you did. And you did. One that transports us away. So thank you. May I ask you, what is the kindest thing you've ever done for yourself as a writer?
Okay, so I wrote the book in a sort of white hot burst of inspiration following my revelation on the bus. And then it was this early 2022. And I sent it out to like a whole bunch of agents, and I was like, I'm going to hear back from them by the end of the day.
Been
And
there.
none of them replied. Nobody even replied. I didn't even get a rejection note. I just got nothing. And then I sent it to like a few more agents and still got no replies. And then I was like, well, maybe either it's not a good book or it's not a publishable book, but maybe I'm just going to have to put this aside. Um, and then I thought maybe it is the problem is with the query letter and the first 5 pages, since none of
Hmm.
them have actually read the book.
Hmm.
So I invested some money in paying somebody at the Novelry. Do you know them?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard very good things.
So I worked with an editor there, and she worked with me on my submission letter, which, as you know, is like in art form and harder to write than a Shakespearean sonnet. And she was tremendously helpful. And then she also helped me with the first 5 pages sample and read the book. And so yeah, spending money on the novelry, that's the kind of thing I ever did because that was the my editor there was like the fairy godmother for this book because after that agent, after that book deal. Thank you, Tash Barsby.
I adore that. And you believed in yourself enough to put down that money to do that. And you also, I mean, what you did there was you thought really sensibly. We could go to disaster. The book sucks. No one's ever going to look at it. Or to real logic. There's an option here that the query letter is not being completed and no one's looking at those first 5 pages. And then you fix that. How much longer after you did that did it take to get an agent? I know that's hard to remember. And
Okay, by the time it was ready to send out, like a week. And then the agent sent the book out. The agent did some work on the book, and then she worked with another agent in the US, and they sent the book out together, and then book deal came in 3 days. So it really felt very like one minute I was Cinderella, like scrubbing the hearth, and the next moment, yeah, it was very surprising, but I think writers are very prone to that black and white thinking, aren't
yes.
they? Either this is brilliant or this is terrible, but really the truth is I actually need to get some help with this and work on it a bit more, and then we'll see what happens.
And it is not worthy of Cinderella throwing it into the fireplace. It is worthy of Cinderella working on it a little bit more and keeping going.
And I think
And
also
yeah.
there's a bit of arrogance in not wanting to accept help. Like before I made this decision, I felt like, well, I don't need this help. Like I teach writing. I've written books. I don't need anyone to help me with this letter. But then I was like, well, of course I need help. Of course I need help. So that was my
Beautiful.
kindness.
Beautiful. Speaking of teaching, you used to teach at Stanford. I taught at Stanford before I moved to New
Did
Zealand. I was
you?
just in the continuing studies
Where was
program.
I?
And were you?
Do you
That's
know
awesome.
Helena?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That yeah, I do miss doing that. I taught memoir writing over there, and it was great. And
I'm so jealous that you live in New Zealand.
well, now you're in Oxfordshire, so that I
It's
mean
very
that
pretty,
sounds
yeah, in a different
wonderful
way.
too.
Mm.
Yeah, but I did love driving onto the Stanford campus and just seeing and feeling the bricks around us, and yeah.
Frozen yogurt.
I know, really good treats. We don't get burritos like that in New Zealand,
Mm.
truly. All right, sorry about that. Tell me, if you don't mind, about a specific moment in your life that during which you knew that you had ink in your veins.
Oh, when I was 8 or 9, I had a fight with my parents and I locked myself in the bathroom. And my parents didn't take this gesture very seriously for some reason. And they went out onto the patio and started having lunch with my brother and sister while I was in the bathroom. And I could see them because the window was above the patio. And I felt really furious. And I went and got a piece of paper and a pen. And I wrote, I hate you all. And then I threw it out. I threw it out the window. And that then they went to pick it up and then they all laughed, which
Oh,
but even so, that act of writing down the way I felt and then getting rid of it felt really, I think that was a moment where I was like, I just really like writing things down. And I felt better afterwards.
isn't that amazing too, that when that question is asked of you, that is what came into your mind. You never forgot that feeling of launching your words into the air and and then obviously as we do as writers, we let go of the results because we have nothing to do with them. But you did not want to be laughed at, but you had that power in that moment.
I felt really terrible. I felt very strong, powerful emotions.
Mhm.
And then I put them on a piece of paper and then I let it go.
And we are still doing that to this day. Perfect. What is the best book that you have read recently?
I read a book called Dearest, by Jackie uh, Waters,
Hmm.
Dearest. It is in the mother horror genre, and it's about a woman who's just had a baby, and she's desperate for help because her husband's away. So she sends an email to her estranged mother, and her mother turns up the next day. But what happens then is really amazing because it's not her mother. And so I love books that give you that WTF feeling. Like I
Yeah.
have no idea where this is going to go next. And Dearest is a book like that.
Your book was like that for me too. So
Oh,
I'm
good. I'm
putting
so
this
happy.
to the top of my TBR because I will read anything that you recommend to me now
Oh, thank
because I
you.
trust you. Can you please tell us about your book? Give us a little bit of a log line and
It's about Charlotte, a mum who has a brilliant 8-year-old daughter, Stella, who she adores. And when Stella's babysitter dies, Stella undergoes a mysterious change. And she goes from being rather difficult, well, very difficult and antisocial, to being obedient and malleable. And everyone else in Stella's life, including Stella's dad, Pete, thinks that this is terrific. But Charlotte thinks something is wrong. And she comes to believe that Stella's babysitter is somehow controlling her from beyond the grave. And Charlotte's the only person who can help Stella. She has to save her from whatever is happening to her.
Oh, it is so good and delicious. And it is it called Clever Little Things on both sides of the world?
Yep, clever
Okay.
little thing.
Yeah, perfect. Can you tell us where you can be found out there?
My name.com, so helenaechlin.com. And on Instagram, I love to be followed or to say hello to people on Instagram.
Fabulous. Thank you for taking the time out of your morning to do this with me. I
Oh, it's
really,
such
really
a delight,
appreciate it.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.